I was suddenly taken aback, feeling somewhat embarrassed. The jar was opened, but it shouldn't count as being opened by me. Kevin looked puzzled, unbuckled his seatbelt, and leaned towards me. Our distance was very close, so close that if someone looked from outside the car window, it would seem like we were kissing. Ding! Wisnovel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Kevin stared into my eyes, his voice surprisingly tense. What do you mean by it shouldn't count as being opened by you? You didn't give it to someone else, did you? I guiltily replied, I didn't give it to anyone, it's just that. The door beside me was suddenly pulled open. Before I could react, my arm was forcefully pulled, dragging me out of the car. The door slammed shut, and Julius Weston stood outside in a black wool coat, looking serious and cold. The hand gripping my arm exerted great force, as if wanting to crush my bones alive. His eyes were filled with a deep anger, as if he wanted to tear me apart. Karina Weston, did you let him kiss you? You actually agreed to let him kiss you. Did you say yes to him? I was stunned. He didn't kiss me. What? You don't think I'm good enough to be your brother-in-law? In the car, Kevin sat up straight. With a provocative look in his eyes, he glanced through the half-open car window at Julius. His voice remained indifferent and calm, but each word carried a sting. You're dating someone yourself, yet you care about whether your sister is dating or not? If you care so much about Karina, aren't you afraid Betty Foster will get jealous? Julius furrowed his brow, his tone unfriendly. I care about my sister. It's none of your business. Kevin smiled slyly. Do you really see her as just your sister? Julius's fist clenched suddenly. I was startled and quickly reached out to grab his arm. Julius, let's go home. Kevin was fearless in his ignorance, but I knew in my heart. Julius's attitude clearly showed that he was carrying a grudge from his past life when Kevin took away his lover. If they kept talking like this, a physical altercation was definitely possible. Karina. Kevin looked deeply at me holding Julius's hand, his eyes icy. Finally, he rarely cursed. I shouldn't have fucking believed a word you said. She lied. That didn't like Julius Weston at all. Liar. The engine roared, and the car drove off like an arrow released from a bow. I watched the taillights disappear around the corner and couldn't help but sigh. Kevin, you have no idea how much Julius Weston hates you. I saved your life. Yuri so reluctant to let him go? Julius's cool voice sounded beside me. I glanced at him inexplicably. He didn't steal your lover in this life. Is it necessary to be so hostile? Julius Weston pursed his lips and gazed at me silently, but he didn't speak. I couldn't help but sigh. Honestly, from waking up until now, it was only at this moment that I had the chance to be alone with Julius. A chance to talk openly about the reincarnation. In the past life, we ruined your marriage. It was our fault. We deserved it all. But the sins to be redeemed, my mother and I have paid for them. In this life, please date Betty Foster well. We don't owe each other anything. Let's start anew, shall we? I said sincerely, but Julius's eyes inexplicably darkened. The veins on the back of his still clenched fist bulged, as if suppressing some emotion. I furrowed my brows. What? He imprisoned us for 7 years in the past life, and he's still not over it? Does he plan to continue taking revenge on me and my mother in this life? Brother. I pursed my lips, facing the moonlight, and looked into his eyes solemnly and earnestly. I wish you a happy life with Betty Foster in this life. Let the past be the past. There was a deep tremor in Julius's eyes. After a moment of silence, his clenched fist, which seemed to have lost its strength, loosened. After that day, Betty Foster started coming to my house more frequently. Although I tried to avoid her, we would still run into each other a few times. Especially on this day, as I stood in front of the dressing mirror, applying lipstick. Betty Foster, dressed in a white dress and meticulously groomed, just walked in. She looked at me with a somewhat strange expression. Karina, are you going to the movies with us? No. I lazily yawned, feeling inexplicably puzzled. If you two have a date, why should I go? I have an appointment with the doctor today to go to the hospital to check on my stomach. In my past life, I eventually got stomach cancer, fearing that the stomach ache from now on might have already started to sow the seeds of disaster. In this new life, I need to cherish my life. Betty finally breathed a sigh of relief. Her face softened a lot. Oh, I see. On the other hand, as Julius was putting on his coat, upon hearing what I said, he paused. He looked up at me, his eyes deep. We'll take you there. No necessary. I had just uttered a syllable when Betty, with a worried expression, spoke up. But Julius, the hospital and the cinema are in opposite directions. We won't make it in time. Then let's go to the cinema another day. Karina's health is the most important. You don't need to worry about her. My mom happened to come out of the kitchen with washed fruits. She has a date today. Kevin will come to pick her up later. Julius furrowed his brows slightly. Betty also looked at me in surprise, her eyes shining. Karina, are you having a date with Kevin Shaw? I nodded somewhat guiltily. Yes. That's fuck yes. I'm not going on a date with Kevin. I never made any plans with him. The so-called date was just an excuse to fool my mom. But what I didn't expect was, when I stepped out, Kevin's car was parked right at the door. Perhaps because he wasn't working today, he wasn't wearing his usual suit and shirt. Instead, he had on a gray hoodie, with his messy hair falling on his forehead, looking particularly handsome. Why did you come? I got in the passenger seat, my face full of shock. Kevin Kevin raised an eyebrow, handed me a bag of snacks, and said in a calm tone, "My mom specifically woke me up this morning to make sure I wouldn't be late for our date." Well, it seems like my mom had already talked to Kevin's mom in advance. "Your mom wants to matchmake us," Kevin stated calmly. I covered my face with my hand, not responding. Kevin Shaw, being a lawyer, could easily see through my family situation with just one glance. My dad holds 52% of the company's shares. After his passing, my mom got 27% of the shares, I got 15%, and Julius Weston got 10%. But I'm a financial idiot, and my mom is too conservative to manage the company. Neither of us can take over the company. Julius Weston, on the other hand, could, but with only 10% of the shares, no one would follow him as a leader. Unless my mom or I give him our shares, then he could rightfully become the largest shareholder. Now that he's with Betty Foster, he's destined to be an outsider to your family. Your mom won't take the risk of giving him her shares to help him rise to power. So, the only way out is to find you a reliable husband. Kevin's analysis was all correct. I was speechless, sighed, and said, "Don't worry, I have my own way. We don't need to." "Yes." He suddenly uttered this one word, leaving me stunned. After blinking a few times, I didn't even react. "Huh? What?" Until I came back from the hospital checkup, I haven't exchanged a word with Kevin Shaw. He remained silent in the car. It wasn't until the car stopped in front of my house and I opened the door to get out that he suddenly called out to me. He also got out of the car, standing in front of me. "Corina." Kevin's gaze lingered on my face, his deep pupils reflecting my image. "I am serious." I nodded in a panic, trying to avoid it deep down. I knew, but Kevin seemed to see through my intentions, his tone becoming grim. "Give me an answer by 8 o'clock tomorrow night. If you're a minute late, I'll sue you." Tisk. I lifted my leg and kicked him. "Yuri asking for it." Kevin laughed heartily, reaching out to ruffle my hair. "So, I advise you not to easily break an appointment with a lawyer. You'll have a tough time." I simply held up my wrists and pushed them towards him. Angrily, I said, "Come on, call the police, arrest me, come on." He grabbed my wrist and pulled me towards him, my face hitting his solid and warm chest. Kevin held me in his arms, hugging me tightly. "I've got you." I was suddenly silent. "What? What's going on?" Bang. Something fell at the corner of the intersection. I turned my head and saw Julius Weston and Betty Foster standing hand in hand at the intersection. There was a paper bag by Betty's feet. Beer cans were rolling on the ground from inside the bag, but my gaze stopped at the half-fallen conspicuous blue and white box of condoms from the paper bag. "Sorry." Betty Foster smiled at us with a surprised look on her face, her eyes shining brightly. She shyly covered her mouth. "I'm really shocked. I even forgot the bag in my hand. The two of you, haha, things are progressing too quickly, aren't you?" Julius frowned, his gaze sweeping over Kevin, who was holding onto my arm. In a cold tone, he said, being all lovey-dovey at the doorstep, "Haven't you hugged enough?" Betty's expression froze slightly. Kevin raised an eyebrow. Not enough." What the heck?" I quickly stepped out of Kevin's embrace, feeling my face burning. Julius's eyes darkened even more as he walked over and pulled me away from Kevin. "How are your test results?" It's nothing." I shook my head. "Just pay attention to my diet in the future, and regular checkups will ensure there are no problems." Julius's expression softened slightly, nodding. Betty Foster smiled and walked up, linking her arm with his. "Julius, let's go inside first. Don't disturb Corina and Kevin's date." However, Julius didn't move, his gaze sweeping over me and Kevin. "It's late at night, and you haven't finished talking?" Kevin frowned, but there was a smile on his face. "Aren't you being a bit too nosy? You've already taken Betty home, and now you're concerned about us." My heart trembled, afraid that Kevin would say something over the line. I quickly pulled him. "I'm going home. Bye, be careful on your way." After saying that, without waiting for their response, I turned and hurriedly entered the gate on my own. Jogging all the way back to my room, I didn't dare to turn on the lights, peeking through the curtains downstairs. Kevin's car had already left and turned the corner. I breathed a sigh of relief, about to let go of the curtain when my eyes caught something. It seemed like Betty and Julius were arguing. 2 seconds later, I let go of the curtain. I could probably guess that the reason for their argument must be related to me. After all, Betty Foster knows about the fact that Julius Weston is my child husband since childhood. Even though they have established a relationship now, she must still resent my existence. That's understandable. Taking out my phone from my bag, I thought for a moment and decided to send a message to Kevin. "Lawyer Shaw, don't forget the task I entrusted you with today. It's very important. Please do it as soon as possible." I was really anxious to completely draw the line with Julius Weston. Although the past events have been decided to let go. But with this rebirth, maybe Julius Weston can act like nothing happened. I can't forget the entanglement of those 7 years, nor can I pretend it never existed. And even without this rebirth, birth. According to the current situation, we are not suitable to stay under the same house again, pretending to be a family. I was suddenly awakened by the ringing of my phone. The moonlight was faint, and I opened my eyes to check the time on the screen. 2:37 in the morning. The caller turned out to be Julius Weston? What does he want in the middle of the night? I curled up under the blanket, feeling a bit more awake. Wait, shouldn't Julius be in bed with Betty at this time? Why is he calling me? Just as I was thinking this, I heard Betty's soft cry through the earpiece. Julius, Julius, I can't, no anymore. Along with her voice, there was also Julius's low, hoarse breathing. My mind jolted. I suddenly opened my eyes wide, completely awake now. With a look of speechlessness, I hung up the phone abruptly. What a lunatic! But what I didn't hear was, at the moment of hanging up, a low, man's hoarse Karina came through the earpiece. When Kevin came to my house with documents, I had been locked in the piano room, practicing for 4 hours. In the past life, Julius Weston imprisoned my freedom, but at least he left me a piano. Those long, painful, lonely times were spent with the piano by my side. Otherwise, I might have gone crazy long ago. Why do I feel like you've improved so much overnight? The music ended, and Kevin pushed the door open. A strong sense of surprise flashed in his eyes. I guess you're almost guaranteed to win this competition. I remained silent and smiled. In the past life, I missed this piano competition because I was preparing for marriage. This life, I won't miss it again. Looking at the documents in Kevin's hands, I raised an eyebrow. Kevin pursed his lips, handed me the documents, looking inexplicable. According to your request, everything is ready. I opened the documents, scanned through them roughly, then looked up at him gratefully. Thank you, Attorney Shaw, for your great help. Have you thought it through? Kevin stared at me and asked. I nodded. Well, this is the best solution to handle our relationship. Kevin paused. In fact, you don't have to rush. After all, Julius Weston and Betty Foster just got together. He didn't say the second half of the sentence, but I knew he meant whether they would end up together or not was still uncertain. It doesn't matter, even if it's not Betty Foster, we still have to be cautious. And the phone call from last night flashed through my mind. I covered my face. Betty Foster is in a hurry. Tisk, a hint of disgust appeared between Kevin's eyebrows. Don't contact her too much. I widened my eyes in surprise. Does Kevin dislike Betty so much? Then why did he marry her in the past life? Kevin Shaw spoke and then sneered lightly. She knows very well that your family adopted Julius as a future son-in-law, yet she still pretends to innocently seduce Julius. What's the difference between her and a mistress? Is that what you think? As if he's not involved? I jokingly glanced up and down at Kevin. He obviously caught on too and reached up to touch his nose. With a light cough, he said impatiently, how can I be compared to her? Is having a secret crush the same as openly seducing someone? Before confirming that you and Julius Weston have no chance, has anyone noticed my feelings for you? What about her? She's afraid that others won't notice her ambiguous relationship with Julius Weston. I even confessed in a sneaky way. You even didn't notice that. Kevin said the last sentence very quietly. I truly couldn't hear it clearly, but when I tried to ask again, he refused to say anything. Kevin didn't stay long. He left after putting down the documents. I escorted him to the door, but he suddenly stopped in his tracks, bent down, lowered his gaze, and leaned closer to me. With a smile on his lips, he said, just a friendly reminder. It's already 5 hours until 8 o'clock tonight. I waved him off and closed the door. Off you go. I rubbed my slightly cold arms, shook my head, smiled, and turned around. Just as I was about to enter the house, I looked up and saw Julius Weston sitting on a rattan chair on the terrace on the second floor, looking at me with a deep gaze. I don't know how long he had been watching.